Shadows in the Mansion, Alone Together, Part 4. Obasi could still hear it. The lingering notes of Nash's laughter, bright and unguarded, ringing in his ears like a melody he never wanted to forget. And yet, like all things with her, it slipped away too soon. The laughter faded into the steady hum of rain outside, and something else took its place. Something heavier, quieter, more uncertain. Nash's hand slowly fell from her lips, but the trace of amusement still lingered in her hazel eyes. She exhaled, tilting her head slightly, as though acknowledging something unspoken between them. Obasi felt himself staring, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't know what to do with himself. Her skin still glowed softly in the dim light, the warmth of her earlier laughter still visible in the faint flush of her cheeks. It was too mesmerizing, the way the laughter had softened her, unraveled something deep inside her. He needed to say something, do something, break the moment before it unraveled him. So he smirked. Thanks for destroying my aspirations. The sarcasm was light, playful, but it had the effect he wanted. To his surprise, an undeniable delight, it made her chuckle again, an involuntary escape of soft, breathless spasms that she once again tried to cover with her hands. That sound, it did something to him. You know, he added, his voice lighter than he felt, I don't think I've ever seen anyone enjoy my suffering quite so much. Her eyebrows lifted slightly, but her lips pressed together, struggling to suppress another smile. But, she murmured, still trying to compose herself, you said you could sing. Obasi leaned back against the sofa, crossing his arms as if settling into his own defeat. Well, in my defense, I said I sing. Never said I sing well. That did it. A tiny laugh, not as free as before, but still enough to reach him. It sent warmth curling through his chest again, and he relished it secretly. But all he did was shake his head, watching her try to pull herself together, and muttered under his breath, Unbelievable. He hadn't known how much he'd needed to see it, to hear it, and then, just like that, it was gone. Nash's posture shifted. She sat straighter, her expression dimming, her amusement slipping away like sand through fingertips. The wall was returning. Obasi watched it happen, a flicker of something in her gaze, not quite regret, but close. And just like that, she was shielding herself from him again. He let out a slow exhale, adjusting his posture, as if that would help shake off the strange pull still pressing against him. Why did it sting? Why did he suddenly feel as though he'd been granted a fleeting glimpse of something sublime, only to have it wrenched away? It was ridiculous. And yet, You have a nice laugh, he found himself saying, before he could think better of it. Her head snapped up, her eyes locked onto his, suddenly guarded. His chest tightened, but he kept his expression easy. You should do it more often. There it was, that brief flicker of something in her gaze, like a shadow passing over the sun. She hesitated. Too long. And then, instead of answering, she did what he should have expected. She changed the subject. Is your wound still okay? Obasi blinked. The abruptness of the question threw him completely off balance. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Oh, right. His wound. Truthfully, he had forgotten about it. It's fine, he said, knowing with sharp clarity that she couldn't possibly know about the new wound she had just inflicted with that decisive switch of conversation. But the way she was looking at him, expecting something real, something unguarded, he found himself hesitating. And then, all at once, the need to know pressed down on him like a vice. Despite the risk of her pulling away again, despite the way she had just reinforced her walls, he needed to know. Who was it? Who had done this to her? Who had made her so restrained, so fearful, so hesitant to trust? His voice was low, deliberate. "You're afraid of someone." Her body stilled. Obasi didn't look away. "I know it's not just the man who attacked you before." His voice was steady, but his eyes were searching. "Who is it?" He should have left it there, but instead, he made the mistake of meeting her gaze as he asked. And that's when he saw her vanish, right before his eyes. Nasha stiffened, her body turning to stone. The air in the room shifted. For the first time since she had arrived, he saw true fear coil through her, not in shudders or flinches, but in complete, absolute stillness. He had touched something untouchable, and he knew, with a certainty that settled like a weight in his gut, that whoever she feared, whoever had made her this way, had been a part of her life for far too long. Nasha's breath hitched, her hands curled into tight fists in her lap. Her mind screamed the answer, "My father," but the words refused to form. Instead, she did the only thing she could. She shook her head. Once, then again. Obasi watched her closely. His own jaw tightened, but he didn't press. Instead, he let out a slow, measured sigh. She wouldn't tell him. Not now. But now that he had seen it, truly seen it, he knew that not knowing was going to kill him. But for now, he decided, he would wait. Once Obasi decided to wait, he quickly shifted gears, keenly aware that the moment Nasha unfroze, her eyes might dart to the window. If she ran, if she bolted into the storm, he knew, without hesitation, that he would chase her. Even if she screamed bloody murder, even if she fought him with everything she had, he would pull her back inside, lock the door, and let her hate him for it. The thought was swift, absolute, and it unsettled him. The idea of letting her vanish into the dark, unprotected, was unbearable. Obasi clenched his jaw, forcing himself to be rational. What's come over me? This wasn't him. Yet, at the same time, it was. Then, another thought gripped him, one that made his pulse pound against his ribs. He hated that he knew, that something was terribly wrong, that whatever had carved that deep, haunting fear into her was real and close. That she wasn't just running from shadows, but from something or someone who had made her this afraid. And at the same time, he hated that he didn't know. That despite everything, he was still blind to the root of it. To the thing that had shaped her wariness, her silence, her every careful movement. He knew enough, yet he knew nothing at all. And that was what unsettled him most. Whoever was out there, whoever had done this, if he could help it, they would never lay eyes on her again. The silence between them stretched, thick and brittle. Before Nasha could shake herself free of it, before she could move, before she could make a decision he didn't want her to make, he broke it. "It's late," he said, voice steady, deliberate. "I should wash up and get some sleep. We both should." The reaction was instant. The air around her tightened, a shift so subtle yet unmistakable. It was in the slight hitch of her breath, in the way her fingers curled just a fraction tighter against her lap. Obasi understood immediately. He saw it as clearly as if she had spoken the fear aloud. Sleep. He hesitated, just for a breath. Then gentler this time. "You can take the bedroom," he said. "I'll sleep on the sofa." There, a correction, an attempt to ease whatever shadow had gripped her. For the first time since she had stepped into his life, he wished he could read her thoughts, not just guess at them, not just pick apart the fragments of fear and silence, but truly know. But even as the words left him, he wasn't sure if they had helped, or if the storm in her eyes had only deepened. He turned, leaving the room with measured steps, resisting the urge to glance back. Struggling against the sudden, unshakable fury burning in his chest, at whatever had put that fear in her. And beneath that, something just as fierce, just as consuming, the desperate need to keep her safe. But if he looked at her now, he wasn't sure what he would see. The lingering terror in her gaze, the stubborn resolve to run, and worse, he wasn't sure what she might see in his. His jaw tightened as he stepped into the hallway, forcing a slow exhale through his nose, willing himself back into control. Obasi stepped into the guest room bathroom, exhaling slowly as the steady rhythm of rain filled the silence. He hadn't prayed in a long time, but as he turned the shower on, he found himself murmuring a silent request that she would still be there when he came out. Working carefully around his wound, he hurried, not because he was cold, not because he was particularly eager for rest, but because the thought of stepping out into an empty room twisted something deep inside him, a quiet, unfamiliar kind of dread. He had finally managed to have a real conversation with her, to see something unguarded, something rare. The echo of her laughter still vibrated in his chest, and yet Kahinder's words pressed against him with quiet insistence. You have to tell her the truth. He would tell her. But first, he had to step out of this room and find that she hadn't left. Dressing quickly, he opted for something less intimate from the guest room closet, foregoing his usual silk pajamas. A loose-fitting tunic and matching drawstring trousers in deep earth brown, simple, understated but distinctly his. There was embroidery woven subtly into the fabric, intricate but not ostentatious, a quiet testament to craftsmanship. It was something he might wear while sketching late at night or studying an unfinished piece. Relaxed, yet still composed. The sleeves were loose, the fabric lightweight, giving him an effortless elegance that suited the hour. With a final sweep of his damp hand through his hair, he stepped back into the softly lit living room. Relief loosened his chest the moment he saw her still seated on the sofa, her slender frame silhouetted against the rain-slicked glow of the window. She was watching the storm, her expression unreadable. Unlike before, she didn't recoil at the sight of him. This time, she turned her gaze to him, really looked at him, with a quiet, assessing curiosity. The sight caught Nasha off guard. She had only ever seen him either wounded or dressed with such precision that he almost seemed carved from stone. But like this slight departure from formality, he was something else entirely. Still commanding, still powerful, but somehow less distant. No, that wasn't quite right. Her gaze lingered, unwillingly tracing over him. The breadth of his shoulders, the strength in the set of his jaw. His cheekbones, sharp and defined, caught the light from the chandelier in a way that made him look effortlessly striking. He had to be at least 6'7", yet even in the quiet ease of his stance, there was an undeniable air of distinction about him. Something measured, deliberate. And his eyes, there was something about them now. No longer as weary, but still piercing, like they saw everything yet revealed nothing. She didn't know why she noticed so much, or why, now that she was really looking at him, she had to admit, this man was handsome. Unreasonably, effortlessly, undeniably handsome. Her fingers curled slightly against the fabric of her dress, grounding herself, forcing her gaze away before it lingered too long. But she had already failed. It unsettled her. Across the room, Obasi exhaled slowly, relief easing the tension in his chest. She was still here, watching him, silent, present. Unlike before, she didn't recoil at the sight of him. This time, when she turned to look at him, it wasn't out of fear, but something quieter, something closer to curiosity. How do you keep finding things to wear that fit you so perfectly? She asked, her voice soft, thoughtful. Obasi hesitated. He hadn't expected that. For a brief second, he considered telling her the truth. That everything, every suit, every perfectly tailored item, every single detail of this mansion was his, because this mansion was his. But then, he thought of how carefully she measured each interaction, how quickly she withdrew at the slightest misstep. He couldn't risk her retreating from him now. So instead, he gave her a small lie, one that sat uncomfortably on his tongue. Coincidence, he said smoothly. The guest room closet is full of them. There were no random suits tucked away in the guest room closet for convenience. The clothes were his. He had placed them there himself for nights when he worked too late. Too drained to bother returning to his bedroom, yet too restless to sleep. Nights when his mind still lingered on unfinished pieces, on details that refused to settle. Over time, he had left enough behind that if the night stretched long, he wouldn't have to go back to his bedroom. But he knew if she asked too many questions, if she pushed too soon, he might be tempted to lie again. And that was a dangerous line to cross. He would take it back later. He would make up for it. Nash's expression flickered, something unreadable passing through her gaze. "Oh," she murmured. A beat of silence then, with a tone too casual to be natural. "Oh yes, I forgot about those." He nearly smirked. She was terrible at this. Lying, it was obvious. But she didn't seem to realize she'd given herself away, and rather than make it worse, he shifted the conversation. "The water's warm," he told her. "Your turn." She hesitated, fingers grazing her wrist absently. "I will." And then, without another word, she disappeared down the hall, up the large staircase toward the master bedroom. Obasi let out a slow breath, rubbing a hand down his face. She was still here. That was enough. For now. He had to tell her. Soon. But how? It still didn't feel like quite the right time. He needed to tell her in a way that wouldn't make her run. Nasha moved with quiet, deliberate intent. The moment she stepped into the master bedroom, she shut the door softly behind her. Then, after a brief hesitation, she reached for the latch and bolted it. A pause. She stood still, listening, straining to hear past the rain, past the beating of her own heart. No footsteps, no movement. He wasn't coming. Still, she didn't take any chances. Stepping away from the door, she glanced toward the bedside table. It was small, but it would do. She slid it carefully in front of the door, an added barrier. Only then did she exhale. With hurried steps, she made her way into the bathroom, locking that door as well. It was only after she heard the quiet click of the bolt that her shoulders lowered slightly. Even so, she didn't allow herself to relax completely. As she undressed, she kept her clothes within reach, just in case. She turned the shower on in short bursts, shutting it off intermittently so she could listen. The sound of the water, the rain outside, and anything else. Any shift of movement, any hint of a presence at the door. But there was nothing. Maybe she didn't have to be this wary. Now that she had spoken to him, Obasi wasn't quite what she had expected. He didn't seem as frightening as she had first thought, didn't carry the same sharp, looming presence that had unsettled her before. His voice had been steady, his words measured. Even his humour had caught her off guard, disarming her in ways she hadn't anticipated. Maybe he really wasn't dangerous. And yet, without meaning to, her gaze flicked to the bathroom door, just for a second, just to be sure. It was locked, just as she had left it. Still, she hurried. The faster, the better. You never know. The thought slipped in like a whisper in the dark, curling around the edges of her mind. She knew better than to trust too easily. Once finished, she wrapped herself in a towel, her damp dreadlocks pressing against her back. She stepped cautiously into the bedroom, eyes immediately flicking toward the door. It was untouched, just as she had left it. Relief flooded her, and she pulled the garbage bag from under the bed where she had stashed it earlier. Sifting through the garments, she chose an indigo blue dress, a deep, rich shade, a color that felt safe. A dress, not a nightgown. She couldn't allow that kind of vulnerability. Not in a place she wasn't meant to be. With steady fingers, she slipped it over her head, smoothing the fabric down her frame. The long sleeves wrapped around her like a shield, offering a subtle sense of security. The fabric, soft yet resilient, moved fluidly over her frame, draping rather than clinging. At the waist, an adjustable tie gave her control, a small but necessary choice. She fastened it without thinking, fingers pulling just enough, not too loose, not too tight, secure but not stifling, covered and not vulnerable. It felt good to have more clothes on. The last time, her stomach twisted. The last time she had tried on one of the dresses she'd found in the bag, she had been attacked. She let out a slow breath, smoothing the dress down, fingers pressing over the fabric as if testing its reality. This fit perfectly, too perfectly. But she didn't want to think about that. Tomorrow she would leave. That was all that mattered. The dresses had been in a garbage bag, tossed out, as if they were nothing. Nasha had found them outside, discarded carelessly by the back door, yet they all looked brand new. Not a single stain, not a single rip. She ran her fingers over the fabric, frowning. Why? What had been wrong with them? Did they belong to the woman of this mansion? Had she bought them for herself, or had her lover draped her in such fine things, only to decide later that they were no longer needed? Nasha hesitated near the edge of the bed. In any case, this dress would do. She needed something practical, something she could sit in, sleep in, and if needed, run in. The material had to be soft yet durable, something that wouldn't show dirt too quickly if she had to wear it for a few days. Then she noticed something strange. Everything in this bag was her size. Her fingers paused mid-motion, her breath catching slightly. The woman who lives here, was she the same size as her? The coincidence unsettled her, but she shook the thought away. It didn't matter. By tomorrow, she would be gone. And at least in this dress, she wouldn't look homeless. Nasha exhaled slowly, smoothing her hands over the dress one last time, before turning toward the door. Obasi had said he would take the sofa. Good, she thought. That distance gave her mild comfort, yet it was still too close. Still, she would stay, lock herself in, keep the bedside table in place, and spend the night here alone. It was safer, smarter. The rain had softened, a steady rhythm against the windows. No movement beyond the door, no sounds from the hallway. But then, the lights flickered. Once, twice. A brief shudder through the room, barely noticeable, but it sent a sharp jolt down her spine. No. She was to the door within seconds. Her fingers hovered over the latch, hesitating. She wasn't staying in here. Her breath hitched as she stepped back, casting a wary glance toward the ceiling, toward the walls, before her hands moved with abrupt urgency, shoving the bedside table aside, unbolting the lock. Without another thought, she stepped out into the corridor, her feet light, her pulse thrumming. She stepped carefully as she descended the stairs. The mansion was silent, save for the distant hum of electricity, the glow of recessed lights casting long shadows against the polished floors. As she reached the living room, her steps slowed. Then she halted. Obasi was there. He lay easily on the sofa, one arm resting over his chest, the other holding an open book. His expression was unreadable, his attention seemingly fixed on the pages. But something told her he wasn't really reading. Her steps slowed. She hadn't expected him to look like this at ease, this composed in the hush that followed the rain. The book in his hands seemed more like a prop than a distraction, something to occupy his hands rather than his mind. He was waiting. For what? She wasn't sure. While she was gone, Obasi had picked up a book. Not to read, he couldn't focus on the words, but to anchor the moment, to steady the space before she returned. Instead of standing, he eased onto the sofa, choosing not to risk unsettling her again the way he had in the kitchen. A precaution, small but deliberate. Yet, even as he turned a page, his focus never reached the words. He felt her presence before he saw her. And so, he didn't look. Because the moment he did, he knew he would unravel. But the moment he glanced up, it was already too late. Bathed and changed, she was breathtaking.